Hi, I'm Auntie Dawn. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm making fried rice. Fried rice is a dish always baffled me. It's not fried. Every other fried dish comes out crispy or crunchy, but fried rice is usually softer than steamed rice because it's been cooked with wet ingredients. My fried rice actually comes out crispy because I start with old brown rice and cook it in a small amount of oil. You can use white rice, but it's probably going to stick more and use up more of the oil. The only place I've encountered a similar dish was a Cambodian Thai Lao restaurant where it was called rice ball and served with lettuce in order to eat in wraps with nok chom. That would be a great way to eat this. So here are my ingredients. I start with cooked brown rice. It should be kind of dry and crumble apart when you poke it. The next ingredient is dried mushrooms. I really like dried oyster mushrooms for this. It's much cheaper to buy them in bulk online, so I buy it in 1 pound bags and then put it into quart jars for use. The next ingredient is garlic. We're going to want about a tablespoon of it. And then a small onion. This is a shallot. And about half a cup of already cooked protein. This is roast chicken. We're going to want about half a cup of a chopped carrot. That's 2 medium ones, or I've got 3 small ones here. 2 large eggs. Salt, I'm going to be using tamari, but soy sauce, fish sauce, whatever you like. Other seasonings, here I'm using Chinese chili crisp, but you can use whatever you've got in the house and sounds good with the ingredients you have on hand. You want some nuts, I'm going to be using peanuts. Some herbs, I've got a bit of cilantro here. And this is a really key ingredient, candied ginger. This is a complicated dish that needs a little bit of sweetness to bring it together, and this brings sweetness and spiciness. And then the last ingredient is oil. I like peanut oil for this recipe. All right, now I'm going to prep my ingredients. I'm going to take about a half a cup of these dried oyster mushrooms and break them up into small pieces. I really want to make sure that there aren't any tough stem segments. Yeah, if there's anything like this, I'm going to put it aside to use in another recipe. Dried mushrooms have just a wonderful flavor, and unlike fresh mushrooms, they're not going to be completely full of water and tend to make your fried rice soggy. If you are going to use fresh mushrooms in this fried rice, I would recommend sauteing the heck out of them to get them really dry, which is going to take a good long while, so make sure you budget enough time for that. Okay, and that ought to do. Next, I'm going to scrub my carrots. I think a lot of the flavor of carrots is in the skin, so I like to leave the skin on and just give it a good scrub first. So what I do is I make sure I rinse off the center part of my sink, and then I can use it. Scrub each carrot. They usually come pretty well scrubbed from the grocery store, but sometimes there's a good bit of dirt left on them and you want to get all of that off because that is not a flavor or texture you want in your finished dish. And so I'm going to dry the carrots very thoroughly. If you're going to wash any ingredient going into this fried rice, it wants to be as dry as you can make it, because any little bit of water that makes its way into the fried rice is just immediately going to sog it and make it not the crispy rice dish that we want. Okay, so now I can chop up my carrots. So I want a pretty fine dice on these carrots. So here near the end of the carrot where it's small, I can just take little rounds, but as soon as it moves up to a larger diameter, I'm going to get in there, slice it in half. Okay, now we're getting past the part where I want it in half. So it's getting whiter again. So I'm going to continue the cut in half and then also go the other direction and slice it in quarters. And then take slightly larger cuts for a little bit. You want the surface area on each piece of carrot to be roughly equivalent. And I'm going to discard the butt when it's getting tough to make that cut, even with a good sharp knife. And here are my prepped carrots. Now I'm going to cut up my garlic. So I'm going to start by smashing it. I'm going to put all my cloves on the cutting board and then use a small ramekin to snatch each of them. Some people have really tough hands and they can do the palm heel strike thing like mythical Chef Josh, but my hands are not that tough. And so I have stopped using the container of oil because I realized that I was getting the bottom of my cooking oil shelf all garlicky, but the ramekins get washed each use. So that's fine. Right. I'm going to want a pretty fine chop on this. When you eat your fried rice, you're not going to be wanting to get a big mouthful of garlic. So how many cuts each clove of garlic gets depends on how big it is. So a big one like this, I'm going to want to give it a slice in half and then give it a few cuts lengthwise before I chop it up. But a small one might only get cut in half, and maybe not even that if it really came apart when I smashed it. All right, there's my prepped garlic. All right, next is my onion. I'm using this nice big shallot. Shallots are really nice because they have a good onion flavor, but it's not an overwhelming onion flavor. So I'm going to cut it in half this way and then give it several cuts down its length before cutting it into a chop. That just leaves my eggs to crack. And I want to get a good scramble on these. I like poking the egg yolks a few times. Maybe this is just a habit from when I raised my own chickens, and sometimes the membrane around the egg yolk is really, really tough, but it really seems to help it come across better even in store-bought eggs. Add a little bit of salt, and then finish beating it until it is quite finely beaten. Chop up my chicken. Small bite-sized pieces for this. It is really handy to have already roasted chicken around the house for a quick meal. In January, I'll be showing you my method. And there's my chopped chicken. I'm going to pluck my cilantro. So first I'm going to give it a good rinse because it came from the garden and goodness knows what happened to it out there. Dry it off. Again, I want it to be quite dry. Now I'm going to just start plucking small sections of leaves off. It's a little quicker to slice it up, but I like the whole little leaves in my finished dish. Trying not to get a whole lot of stem in there because the cilantro is not going to get cooked because it's going in right at the end. If you're working with an end section of cilantro like this, make sure you get all the little sections of leaves right from the end because those are the most tender. It's kind of easy to overlook them and leave them on the twig. All right, so when I've taken everything, this is what is left. And there's my prepped cilantro. And I've got one more thing. Got my peanuts. I'm gonna pour in the amount of peanuts I'm gonna want to put in, probably about 1/3 of a cup. And then also add my candied ginger. This is already chopped up, so I'm going to add a couple of tablespoons of that. This way I'm just not having to get into the containers at the end when everything is coming together and I'm brushing against the sog. Okay, I've turned on my vent fan, opened a window, and heated up a small cast iron. I'm going to add a small amount of oil. And then rotate it around so it coats. And then add my garlic. While that's sauteing, I'm going to add a little bit of my salt, that is my soy sauce, to my dried mushrooms and stir them a bit so that it can be soaking in. All right. Once the garlic started to cook, I'm going to push it over to the side and add my shallots. I'm not sure why it makes such a big difference, but putting in the garlic first and letting it start to cook makes a difference. It's something I learned in Thai cooking. So as you're stirring, you want to make sure you break up where the onions are holding on to each other so that they can all cook by themselves. All right, now they're starting to get a little translucent, so I'm going to gather them up, add a little bit of salt. Now I'm going to gather all of this up and remove it to this plate. It may seem like I'm just getting another dish dirty, but this helps control how much everything gets cooked. So I do it every time. All right, a little more oil into the pan. And add my dried mushrooms. It's pretty important to cook mushrooms thoroughly. The structural material it's made out of, called chitin, doesn't break down in the human digestive system when it's raw. So you want to give it a good cooking so that you actually get the food value out of it. And if you're feeding this to somebody under 2 years old, I would recommend leaving the mushrooms out entirely because humans don't develop the ability to break down even well-cooked chitin until we're at least 2 years old. All right, these have started to brown. So I'm going to remove them. And the little bits of mushroom really want to stick to the plate, so I'm going to give them a good scrape to get them off. Right. More oil. And my carrots. You can hear them hiss. The carrots are a wet ingredient. So they're going to help bring up all of these little bits of mushrooms that are still stuck to the pan. All right. I'm going to cover them so they steam a little bit, and that'll also help bring the mushrooms up. I'm going to take my large cast iron that I'm going to fry the rice in and get it preheating. Okay, the carrots are starting to cook, so I'm going to gather them up, give them a little bit of salt, and cover them again for a moment. Basically, I want to cook everything completely in the first cast iron because it's only going to get reheated with the fried rice. If I let it cook with the fried rice, it will transfer its moisture and make the rice soggy. The carrots are nice and brown, so I'm going to turn off the heat and remove them. Turn the heat back on. My last ingredient that I'm cooking here is some chicken, which it's already cooked, so I'm basically just rewarming it and getting it in the same flavor place as the rest of the ingredients. Again, gather it all up, give it some salt, and remove. All right, this is the point of no return. If you're not going to finish making the fried rice now, stop. Okay, now my cast iron is nice and hot. So I'm going to add yet more oil. Basically, you want the whole bottom of the pan to be coated. If you're using a wok, you can probably get away with a little less, but my wok is pretty big and awkward, so cast iron today. So right off, I'm going to add a little bit of soy just to get that salt in there. And so it can start drying out again. For this, you want something like a metal spatula where you really scrape the bottom of the pan, because this rice really likes to stick, even with a well-seasoned cast iron. So the really hard thing is leaving it while it does this. I am endlessly tempted to fuss with it, but unless I leave it with the rice heating up from the bottom and being almost like popcorn. You can hear it kind of spluttering. That's what I want it to be doing. If I'm stirring it all the time, it's going to get hot but not crispy. So the rice is going to go through a period of feeling a bit damp. If you see a little bit of gloss on the rice right now, that is where it's at. It takes about 10 minutes for the rice to go through the full process of moistness and get to crispiness. Don't worry, it'll happen. You just need to let it cooking on about medium heat and don't lose faith. Okay, the rice is starting to get crispy. You can hear that little snapping sound. And you really want to scrape the bottom of the pan well, because this rice would really like to stick. It's going to start getting a hard feel to it, almost like puffed rice. Okay, the rice is nearly done. You can tell when it starts getting, it's brown rice, but it will get additionally browned, and there will be a whole lot of crispy, and it will actually start hopping out of the pan, again, like popcorn. So now I'm going to push it to one part of the pan and pull the rice over, and then put in a bit of oil, and then pour in my egg. Now that the egg is nicely cooked, I'm going to stir it in with everything and then add my other ingredients. And at this point, I'm going to turn off the heat and just let the heat from the rice bring everything up. Get everything stirred together. Now I'm going to add my nuts and candied ginger and my cilantro. And this is also the time when I'm going to add a bit of my seasoning, in this case, chili crisp. Chili crisp. All right. And this is my fried rice. I hope you enjoy this as much as I do. See you next time.